What's going on, everybody? We are here today to talk about the spring practice, spring game, any recruiting that's going on. And we have the distinct pleasure of a wonderful guest that we're going to jump in on right now. But let's hit the intro first. Let's go. Welcome back, everyone, to another edition of Hurricanes Unfiltered, powered by Come On Now, the podcast. I am your host, Rudy Rodriguez Showmon. Hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, ring the bell, hit us up on social media, hype the video. Yo, we're excited. I got my boy in the building, man. He's a guy I've known for a long, long time. Helped him start InsideTheU.com, now 247 Sports. We do this probably a couple times a year now. Yo, I got Chris Stock in the building with me. I messed that up right there. Got the wrong graphic up. There we go. Chris, what's popping? Chris, man, how you doing, brother? Hold on, let me take you off mute. What's going on, brother?
Not much, man. Good to talk to you. Yeah, spring practices finally wrapped up here. It was quicker than normal. Usually it's about a 6-week thing. You throw in a week of spring ball, 5 weeks of practices, and they condensed it a later season. They went after spring practice, after spring break. So it's just 4 weeks, but they got their 15 practices in. That was the goal. That's what NCAA allows, and they got it in. And back at Cobb Stadium for the spring game.
What did you think of the spring game? I wasn't there. You were there. What anything that stood out to you at the spring game?
Yeah, just first off, the energy there was good. I think for the fan experience, I would like to think like they try to make it as good as possible. They obviously it's not a big crowd, 5,500 there is what they say. So hopefully the fans had a good experience, the ones that were able to attend. I think they've kind of tried to make improvements. This is their third year they've had it there. They actually moved the bleachers up onto the track, so you're a little bit closer. So atmosphere-wise, maybe a little bit better, and hopefully everybody was able to kind of track things. I will say personally, it was a little hard, maybe even more difficult than normal on tracking everything. So what they did was a little bit of one-on-ones in the beginning. They go into some team drills, which was 11 on 11. It looked like a spring game in a sense, but they didn't take players to the ground. So they're kind of going up and down the field, offense, defense. After they did that for about 20, 30 minutes, then they get into this game, 11 on 11. And, full tackling and things like that. But, it wasn't like an orange and green game. They didn't keep score. They actually ran a lot of hurry up stuff. So it's hard to keep track of. I didn't talk to other reporters about keeping stats, but I always try to keep stats because doesn't provide that. So I actually went back and, I kind of had some voice cues on my videos and then went ahead and watched the videos back to get true statistics. So it was fast paced. It felt overwhelming. I overheard some fans like, "Who was that? What number is this guy? Who's going on?" So returners have changed numbers and a lot of new players. So in totality, I thought it was a good for what they wanted to do. It was good to get a good look at Darian Mensah. I had him for 14 of 19, 146 yards, 3 touchdowns. I liked his touchdown passes, all 3 of them into the end zone. He had a 29-yarder, 33-yarder, and then a 5-yarder. So all those balls were thrown right there at the end zone. So that was good to see. And then disappointing, didn't get a chance to see Malachi Toney in the spring game. He was there doing one-on-ones. Same way with Mark Fletcher, did some team drill stuff, but neither of those guys participated in the tackling, which those are your 2 headliners in addition to the new quarterback. So that would have been nice to see. But all in all, it was fine, I guess. I think there were some productive moments on both sides of the ball.
Well, was there any particular reason that Malachi Toney and Mark Fletcher didn't participate? Are they injured or not injured? They sat him out.
Yeah, probably just don't want them to get injured. They've not been held out from when we've been out there at spring practices when we're allowed to be out there. It wasn't something that they had dealt with. There were other players that were kind of in and out of spring practices that were held out, but those 2 guys just did not participate. Like I said, they were in full uniform earlier or on that same day doing the other stuff. They just didn't do the team stuff there or the spring game stuff.
Is there an aura now about Malachi Toney?
100%, Rudy, 100%. A lot of people locally at the parks, youth football, wherever Malachi, him coming up, There was a lot of excitement about him, but this is just taken off to another level. We see this every now and again at Miami, essentially that true superstar in a sense. Certainly locally from Miami fans, the youth, they all look up to him. There's a buzz about him. The fans, there's a true buzz. And Rudy, you obviously paid attention to Miami football for a really long time, but fans know the difference. Yeah, everybody knows the difference when it's a Malachi Tony and what he means, not just to football or even the conference, but just on a national landscape. Like, he is one of those ones. He's one of those guys, and I think everybody recognizes that. And I think it's going to pick up even more once the season gets going. And I think Malachi's going to have another big year, or possibly even bigger than last year. I think everything is going to kind of catch up, and nationally, he's going to even be a bigger name, a lot of buzz, a lot of excitement, even more than everything locally. And it's fun. It's fun when these kind of guys, I mean, this is why one of the reasons what has drew a lot of fans to this program are players like this, the exciting style, one of the best at his position, these kinds of players, an offensive player in particular. So no doubt about it. And it's been earned. Malachi earned it last year. Whatever hype he had coming into the year, he delivered, and then he took it to another level as he kind of helped this playoff run there.
Have you seen? Well, let me go back to this. Darian Mensah, saw him at Duke, saw him at Tulane. I saw him at Tulane. I don't know if you saw how many times you saw him play at Tulane, but we saw Duke for sure. Is he everything that we believe he is or can be? Because every podcast, I saw a few podcasts yesterday, and I mean, even the ones that typically hate Miami are glazing Darian Mensah and are on the Darian Mensah train. I had one that said he is the best passer in college football. I had one that, that they are better. They're even better than we thought they were. What are your thoughts of Darian Mensah and how he performed, and what do you think of him?
Yeah, one more thing on Malachi. I was just thinking about, as I said, Rudy, I think he's faster. I think he's better. And I think that's crazy in a sense because he was so good last year. But I think you're going to see that just watching him in practices. So I think there's a level up that he's already taken. And I've talked to some players about that, and they said, yeah, I mean, they feel it too. So with Darian Mensah, it's interesting because, look, this is what we're going to do. We did it last year with Carson Beck. How does he compare to Cam? And now Darian. How does he compare to Carson? How does he compare to Cam Ward? It's just the discussion that he's in. I think one of the things that stands out to me, gets the ball out quick. He's not, just like in comparison, he's not the size that Carson is or was for but he's got good size. He throws it, he threw the ball well downfield. I thought at the spring game there, he gets it out. I think that the thing is they're going to try to get it out fast. And I think what's going to be interesting with Darian, and the skills are there, he passes those kinds of tests. He can throw it. He looks to be able to throw, quick game. He can get it out to the receivers, could go deep, the intermediate stuff. Everything kind of checks out in that sense from what he did at Duke. I think one of the things that is something to watch for with Darian is just essentially it's a step up in program and expectations. Now, he's going to have to deliver in those moments. That'll be the big thing. And we're not going to know that. Nobody's going to know that. You could predict it. You could, because he has a skill set. You like what you see, but you're not going to know until he's in those moments how he handles that kind of pressure. And look, he deserves a lot of credit for last year for Duke. Winning the ACC, going through it, and then winning the ACC title game. But there is major expectations for him for this program. The spotlight is completely on him. This isn't Tulane and this isn't Duke. So I think how he handles that, how he embraces the leadership of when it's going to be his team, because it's always the quarterback. Eventually it is your team. There's other guys that have been here, but eventually you kind of has to shape it to you. And some of those things that maybe we'll find out more answers over the summer workouts, those kinds of things. But yeah, he does check the boxes of how he throws it. I think the other thing, in addition to adjusting to all this, essentially the pressure, the expectations, is how this offensive line is going to do. Look, a lot of new faces. And I think anybody, even the people that are really encouraged by what they see with the offensive line, I don't think there's anybody here that's going to say they're going to be better this year than last year. I think it's just naturally, just with what they had last year. I think it's a step back. Now, What level of step back? I think that's what we'll wait and see. But I think Darian, how he meshes, how the offensive line plays, will be a big factor in this too. So they like the pieces they have, but again, it's just taking a step back. And again, that might be something as the season goes on. They've got to get better. And certainly when you look at the beginning of the season with Darian, with the O line, these other question marks that this team has, they have an opportunity to really answer it based on the competition. I think that's a positive thing for this team.
So, would you say that? I mean, I think it's probably obvious asking the question, but how much does Cooper Barkate help Darian Mensah in his adjustment and his starting here at Miami and feeling comfortable? Because throws the ball to Cooper Barkate, you can see that, and even in the spring game, and it made some nice throws from the videos that I've seen. What would you say about Cooper Barkate and how he performed in the spring as well?
Yeah, Cooper's going to help Darian because he's a good player. Like I know the connection is going to be because of Duke, but no, he's a good player. He's going to help any quarterback. I mean, that's just the reality of what Cooper brings to the table, and you get to see that on a daily. Being out there at practices. He touched on the spring game. He goes 4 catches, 74 yards, and a touchdown. He does a good job in traffic. I mean, he's got. I've just really been impressed by watching his footwork off the line of scrimmage. It's fun to watch the acceleration. And then you kind of see it, on his breaks, whether he's cutting on the either top of the route or just any of the breaks. So he does a good job there, planting his foot, kind of getting separation from the defender, and then he does a good job after the catch. So he's just in addition to having good hands, but I really like his footwork, and yeah, he's going to help Darian. I think he's going to help Darian with the other stuff in terms of knowing somebody, maybe handling these expectations, handling everything. But yeah, he's a reliable target, and I think that helps. But yeah, Cooper's going to help any receiver or any quarterback because he's a good player and he's someone that's been around and can be productive. But that's definitely going to help. And I think same way with the other receivers. Even though they haven't had that connection on field with Darian, previously, look, if they're good players, they're going to help. I haven't posted this clip, but I thought Van Travis Jacobs made a really nice play where he almost dropped it. It was a one-handed catch in traffic, a little kind of a short pass, but plays like that's going to help the quarterback. But yeah, certainly Cooper, the connection that they had over 1,000 yards. They're both California kids, so they definitely have that connection as well, which helps, and they both have said, essentially they're each other's best friends. So that's definitely positive for those guys.
The rest of the receivers, I mean, we have a couple of transfer guys in from South Carolina, West Virginia. How those guys, though, I mean, how do they fit in? Because this wide receiver group seems to be really, really deep this year, comparison to last year.
Yeah, you got essentially. I mean, you do, Rudy. You have 4 receivers on this year's team who led their team in receiving last year. That's including Malachi there. So 3 guys: Cooper, touched on Jacobs, and Cam Vaughn at West Virginia. I think Van Travis is a little bit ahead of Cam Vaughn in terms of a pecking order and a production standpoint. So, and Van Travis has been known as a deep threat guy. And he said, look, he doesn't want to be known as just that. I think that's kind of the next thing for him and his progression, his development as a player. So I got Van Travis a little bit ahead of Cam. Cam had a nice moment. He had a really good catch, but that Mario Cristobal kind of called back because of a sack. But the play did get completed. A really nice, about a 20, 30-yard catch on the sideline in traffic in the spring game. But with Cam there, then also, look, you've got those 3 newcomers, but then how do these 2 other guys come in? Coming off last year, Joshua Moore, how's he going to do stepping up with a good size? And obviously you've heard the reports he's sustained a little bit of an injury there pregame at the spring game. So we'll see how he does in his recovery. I don't have anything to report with the extent of it. And then Dalen Upshaw, a guy that has a really close relationship, a really close bond with Malachi Toney. And he looked, didn't have much production last year, but again, going into year 2, he's looking to be in the mix. And, you've got a few freshmen as well. Samarian Wingo's got some positive signs. Van Spafford had some nice productive moments in the spring game. But look, you're touching on, 7'8". Milan Paris had a good spring game, a freshman, 6'5", 6'6". But, will this team kind of be more in that 5 receiver, 6 receiver, maybe rotation that like they've been the last couple of years when they've had these productive quarterbacks?
Do you think we're going to see more traditional 4 wide rather than that 3 wide tight end slot garbage? Yeah, I call it garbage because I think it's awful. It limits you. But then I guess the question would be then, do we actually have a tight end this year?
No and no. No, I don't. No, I don't expect them to change.
Oh
I
boy.
I don't think we'll. I think they're gonna, employ. I think they'll go with Elijah Lofton. They're hoping Luca Gilbert takes that next step. I thought Mueller, for what we've seen out as a true freshman, it's a very difficult position for a true freshman to play, making that transition. There's just a lot that goes into playing tight end, but he's got some positive signs that maybe he could be a contributor. But I think they're just gonna. I think they feel like the tight end is important. But I don't think, do they have someone that's going to be productive? No, I don't see it. I think maybe similar to last year, really, in terms of production. Maybe Luca with his size can be a little bit more of a red zone target. Mensah did like throwing to his tight ends last year at Duke. Carson Beck was the same way, though. He liked using his tight ends. And I just think it's going to be very similar, Rudy. But maybe in the future, if these guys, depending on how they develop, they've got a chance. But yeah, I just don't think that they've got Elijah Lofton just doesn't seem to be that guy that everyone was hoping he would be, or even sometimes seeing the flashes that we've seen a little bit in practice at times. This spring, I mean, we're not out there all the time, but yeah, the drops were there and just not coming down with passes. It's just not a good sign. When a couple years ago, I remember him doing one-on-ones and essentially looked like he came down with everything. So, yeah, I just don't see it. I don't see it with that position group.
All right, that hurt my soul. I was hoping we would have.
But Rudy, I would say I do think that's going to be a talking point. Should this team kind of go with more 4 receiver sets? Essentially, you've got some good receivers. Let's get essentially the best 11 on the field a little bit more.
Yeah.
But and maybe it'll be a transition thing that slowly will happen. I just don't really see them just taking the tight end position out of it completely.
You mentioned the offensive line. Everything I've read and seen video-wise on Cantwell is high praise. That the one guy he's had issues with is the dude from Missouri, Wilson. But other than that, he's a dominant offensive lineman. He's 18 years old. He benches 500 plus pounds, which is outrageous for someone that age, from what I've read. What did you see about him? How did he look? And then on top of that, they got this commitment from this dude from JUCO, Hawk, he looks like a freaking tower. 6'9", 335. Is he a guy that could actually be in the starting lineup, even though he missed a spring because of his size? I mean, just that massive size.
Yeah, just with Cantwell, he's still sitting at 17 years old. Hasn't turned quite 18 yet.
Oh, he's Malachi Tony again.
Yeah, I mean, Armando Blunt. We've seen these guys that you'll look up and yeah, they're just young right now. So
yeah.
Yeah, the thing with Jackson, I think it's been, a decent spring for him. I wouldn't say everything's just been great from what I've seen. But I think with Jackson, even the spring game too, the thing with him, you're just believing in the development. He will turn 18 in May. I do want to point that out.
Okay.
Next month. But I just think with his development, continuing to work, continue to ask questions, these are traits that he has had for a long time and wants to put in work, wants to be good, never complacent type of guy. You just hope as the season goes on or as the season starts, he's going to be fine. I think that's the thing you trust in. Yeah, the size is there, 6'8", 330, right around in there. He has good footwork. He knows he's got to continue to work on pass protection. That's going to be, I mean, that's really the thing that almost all tall offensive linemen, especially when they're young, just have to keep working on. And he hasn't seen pass rushers like this at the high school level on a continued basis. And you touched on Damon Wilson. Damon Wilson was a very good player at Missouri. He was a really top recruit, really high, one of those high recruits. And now he's come into Miami a little bit more, even more experienced too. So yeah, for him to have struggles against him, I think it's not a huge surprise, but I don't think it's I don't think it's just right off Jackson. He's not going to be good, or, he knows he has stuff to work on. But I think it was good for him to be out there. It was good for Jackson, like some of these other freshmen that came in last December and were part of the playoff run. They're part of the scout team, and just for them to see it, him to ask. That was the thing that I kind of heard a couple of these guys, especially with Jackson, but just he comes in, he's asking questions to the upperclassmen, essentially while they're still around, even though they're working to that playoff run. And, that's just a positive sign that he kind of continued the traits that made him successful at the high school level into this level. And I don't think he's, Yeah, I think he's going to be good. I think he definitely has a chance to be, and we'll see. If we're comparing players like we do a quarterback, for example, Francis Maui-Noah, highly rated guy coming out of high school, recently started as a freshman. I don't think Jackson is at the same level as Francis was coming in terms of readiness or just ability right there. Francis was just really good, really impressive. But I think Jackson could certainly get to a high level too at So and he knows it. He said, they threw me into the fire. So he's certainly productive spring, productive summer, or productive December, and the fact that he was here and able to get reps. I think that's really important.
For looking at Cantwell one more time, is it fair to say that there are expectations of him coming from a family of Olympic shot putters and the mentality of winning? And because he also threw the shot put, I saw almost like 75 feet. I mean, I threw the shot put in high school. I don't know that our pit could have held a 75-foot throw. Like that's a ridiculous throw. So like when you come up with people like that and your parents are silver medalists in the Olympics, I mean, what are your thoughts to that?
I think he's grown up with it. This is just something that happened. He's had expectations his whole life. He's always been known, touched on Malachi Tony. I said one of those ones coming up. I mean, Jackson too. Jackson was one of these guys as a middle scorer. The high school team talking to his coach when I went there to Missouri last year. They were just waiting for him to arrive. One of those guys that they've been really excited about. And I think Jackson has embraced it. And also I think it's really helped him in terms of expectations of his parents. He knows that. And Rudy, if I could just kind of just add to, it's obviously very rare for both parents to be Olympic athletes, but especially in certain parts of the country where, there's just not a lot of either pro athletes coming from there or Olympic athletes. So he's been growing up with that expectations even higher or even more than before. It's not like, in areas where you like here in Miami, you've kind of either known a lot of, if you're coming up, you've either known someone from your school, from your park, wherever that might be, that has made it to the next level at a really high level. So I just think it's even more enhanced when you're at an area that doesn't have all those types of people going on to those kinds of things. And I think he's just handled it well. He understands expectations. He knows he has high expectations at Miami. He knows he's a highly ranked guy. I just think he's dealt with it. This is what now it is different because you're going to a high level football program now. The expectations for the team, everyone's going to be on him about being good, and coaches threw him in. He's the first team left tackle all spring, essentially. So I just think he's just kind of handled it his whole life, and I think he's just kind of embraced it. I think he's used it as a positive and not as something that's going to deter him or a detriment to him. He's just handled the spotlight very well throughout his life, really.
Looking at the shifting over to the defensive side of the ball, anything that stood out defensively? This defensive line, I mean, loaded with talent. I saw Moten didn't practice. Did he not practice at all in the spring?
No, he was out, had a boot on his left foot throughout
So
the
that's
spring.
probably still from the
Yep,
national championship, right
100%,
back in
100%.
January. Wow. Do we even know what that injury was, or was a lower extremity? We don't even really.
Yeah, he
know.
just had a boot on his left foot. I
Okay.
don't know the exact nature of it, but they're expecting big things out of him. But yeah, the defensive line, if that's
Yeah,
the
that was the
next
question. Like
topic.
the D line, like I've actually put out that I mean it could be a better D line than this past year. You may not have Bain and Mesidor, but it's a loaded defensive line.
Yeah, I mean, just hearing you say that, you speak more highly of him than I do. And that's just because of Bain and Mesidor. I mean, both of those guys were just excellent at pass rushing, excellent at
Yeah.
run stopping,
Mhm.
stopping the run. I think that's the biggest challenge for the defensive ends with this group. Yeah, they certainly have talent, Rudy. I'm not going to sit here and say they don't. And again, when I speak on these things, it's just the way I see it. And when I have these question marks, it's not that they can't be answered. It's not that they can't be delivered. We saw this defense last year really step up. I mean, we saw Keontae Scott. I know we're not defensive line, but Scott and Thomas really take a huge step last year, really impactful players. But yeah, I think Damon Wilson, he's got to be good against the run. He can't just be a pass rushing specialist. These defensive tackles no longer have Bain and Mesidor. So Justin Scott, year 3, let's see, Armando Blunt, let's see how these guys do. Ahmad Moten, now is, he's no longer the guy. Yeah, it's no longer the guy like, hey, can he get into the rotation like he was for most of his career last year? The showing of the positive signs, the really impressive performances, the really impressive, football focus marks that he got all season long. As the year went on, I thought it felt like he was just even more productive. So yeah, can you stack it? How can you do even better than last year now that there's like even more of a focal point? So yeah, I think, and will these other guys, these rushers, will Hayden Lowe get back in the mix? Obviously, not knowing exactly what's going on with him. Mario Cristobal was asked about it twice during spring ball. I asked him one time, somebody asked about him again. He just kept saying he's going through some personal stuff, whatever that means. He just said that's all he would say. So that not transparency with that, but there's obviously something going on with Hayden. So we'll see if he can kind of get back in good graces, because he's a guy that I think everybody would have counted on him, being a really productive player, a really good player for this team. But now if he's not in the mix, or if it's more of a limited, whatever, if he just has to be reliable, and we'll see how that goes. But Marquise Lightfoot, again, he's been in the program. Can he take that next step? But good pass rusher, but stopping the run. Again, Booker Pickett, kind of similar situation. So I think all these guys, and I think it's important. But yeah, I think the defensive line, they definitely have pieces. They definitely have experience. That's good with Damon Wilson as well. He has that experience coming over 2 other stops. But yeah, I guess, Rudy, I'm curious, where do you think they're going to be better at? Or what gives you, if I throw it back to you, something, I mean, because you speak highly, you think they could be even better. So what is it that you're seeing or that you're thinking with this group?
Well, I'm not discounting obviously how great Ruben Bain was, or even Mesidor was. I mean, if you want to be completely transparent, I thought Mesidor was better than Bain last year, and I thought he was better than Bain. I thought he was more consistent throughout the season. Bain had some really big dip. I think Bain's peak was higher than Mesidor's peak, but I think he had dips where he kind of disappeared at times. I don't know if you saw that as well, but I thought there were times where he just wasn't there. And then as the season progressed, you saw that rise back up, and where he was just absolutely dominant. I thought Mesidor was fantastic. I think people forget that Mesidor is a grown man. I mean, he's 24, so he was a grown man football player. Um, so, but then I look at the defensive line, the defensive tackles. Ahmad Moten, to me, is the closest resemblance of the havoc he was causing at the end of the season, in from the defensive tackle spot. He didn't play that SMU game, or if I'm correct, right? He didn't play that game. I don't believe he played that game, and we lost that game, and I'm pretty sure he didn't play. And that was when we had a whole bunch of guys out. But Ahmad Moten just seems to really bring that closest resemblance to me of gosh, I don't remember a defensive tackle that reminded me of him. He reminds me of Warren Sapp. And I know that's high praise. I'm not saying he's Warren Sapp, but his motor's crazy, his passion's crazy. His production, he was just causing havoc in the backfield to me. And the fact that I don't give a damn about my ankle. I'm playing. Like, you're not stopping me from playing. That mentality is contagious to me. Now the other guys, you do have, when I looked at it, you do have legitimately five-star defensive linemen on this team, and there's expectations of being that type of player. So, you know, I don't know that we had the depth last year. I think we have more depth. It seems like now you're telling me Hayden Lowe. I guess he hasn't practiced all spring either. Basically,
he was out there. He was out there for the early portion of it. I don't remember exactly what practice. But he probably missed half.
That's concerning to me. That's concerning, obviously, because I would expect him as a 5-star last year, missing all of his freshman season due to injury. You want to see if this guy can get on the field. So that's a concern. But when you just look at the pure raw talent of the group, I'm not saying they're gonna be better, but I think the defense could be better, because I think the secondary's better. As good as Keontae Scott and Jacoby Thomas were, I think the secondary could be better. Everything I've heard about this kid, JJ Dunnigan, is off the wall. I don't know. What are your thoughts of this guy? Because you've seen him. Every report on him is like he's God. Or do you have a negative thought?
I think it's going to be good. I don't. Yeah, I
You've
think it's
seen the
going to be good.
reports, I'm sure. You've seen what people say. So.
I really don't, but I know people are excited. I feel like Rudy, I feel like everyone's just great, right? This team, just everyone's this is a perfect team. I think JJ showed his okay, look, his positives are the speed is there, straight line speed is there. Good size. He's the biggest safety they have on the roster. Yeah, amount of practice, it's clear to see he's bigger than the other safeties. So the size is there.
Okay.
I think he's going to be a guy. I don't think he's going to be a starter on this team. I've said that kind of repeatedly.
Okay.
And I don't think it's going to be very difficult to have the production that Bryce Fitzgerald had last year
Yeah.
with those 6 picks. That's just a really high number, even for a starter.
Yeah.
So I just think I think it's just going to be important for him to kind of continue to develop, have a good summer, continue to adjust, understand this is something that I mentioned about him based on things that I've heard from other guys, but he just has to understand his size and how much that can be a very positive thing, be physical and, just really impose his size on players. And I think, you see it in some one-on-one stuff that he's got to use his size a little bit more to his advantage. And I think that'll be something to kind of work through and work towards, continue to learn the defense, which he said he feels good about that. But that, it's just, I only say that because he's a freshman, because he's a young player. Continue to learn and kind of watch the other guys. I think that'll be important for him. I think he's got good upside, certainly. I just don't see him, really having that big impact role. But on the flip side, and saying that, Rudy, if you told me, I wouldn't have said this about Bryce last year either. Him coming in the summer, I wouldn't say, oh, Bryce is going to be just fine. Throw him in. He's going to have 6 picks. I wouldn't have said that. So, but yeah, I do think Bryce, if we're comparing the two, because what Bryce was able to do last year, I do think Bryce, just with his abilities and things like that, fitting in and all those things, I think that one doesn't surprise me as much as JJ, even though JJ's highly regarded and there is reason to be excited about him.
What about Omar Thornton out of BC American Heritage? I mean, is he the hitter? On video, he's a hitter, but does he look like Jacoby Thomas or a better version of Jacoby Thomas?
I don't think he's a better player. I don't think Omar was a better player than Jacoby last year. I think Omar's going to be the starter at safety. I think that's what I've been kind of saying consistently. Just him and Poyser. I think those will be their safeties. I think Bryce will be that nickel back, kind of fitting in there, kind of making a little bit of a transition rather than just being at a safety. So yeah, I think Omar. His teammates know he's a hitter. The way they talk about him, and we saw last year, obviously, and kind of things he's done the last couple of years at BC. So, but yeah, I think certainly for him, transition, not just being a run stopper, he's got to be good against the pass. And that's, those are things that he's paying close attention to. But yeah, he's going into year 3, already been a productive player at BC, but yeah, taking that next step there in the secondary there.
I know we got to wrap this up soon. I have a couple final ones just for you. The one position that does concern me besides tight end is a linebacker. I know we got Mo Toure coming back. I know he's like in his 37th year of college football. He's
just his 8th, Rudy. Just his 8th.
He's the 8th year. I mean, that's absolutely. I didn't even realize he was that old, to be honest. When he got here last year, I thought he was a 5th year senior. So he was a 7th year senior, and here I was complaining about Indiana having a 7th year guy. What beyond Mo Toure, how does is it Chance Smith? Is it Chase? I always forget. Is it Chase Smith?
Chase.
What should we see from the linebackers? Because I guess that's my biggest concern position defensively.
Yeah, and I think this is what's going to be something to watch for. I thought last year they were just kind of solid, the way I kind of viewed the linebackers, but I thought the defensive line was able to kind of really help the linebackers. I thought the secondary, because how good they were able to help the linebackers. Linebackers just had to be solid. They didn't have to be the best group. But yeah, Mo Toure back for year 8. He was not out there all spring. Wasn't out there. So, just kind of making sure he's going to be okay physically. Chase Smith was the guy that's stepping up. And coach early on in fall camp, Coach Cristobal said that they just really think highly of him. So we'll see. We've seen Chase, he's been around as well. Year 6 for him. Can he take that next step and be one, like I said earlier, be a full-time guy, be a full-time reliable guy. He's essentially been in some spot moments. He's kind of been buried on depth chart, coming with his injuries, dealing with that, trying to come back. But yeah, he looks the part. If you didn't know, like, he's got good size out there. His length is good, so that's something. And then after that, it was kind of interesting. Coach Cristobal really called out. He just said young linebackers. He didn't say the names. He didn't identify exactly who, but yeah, he felt like those guys needed to step up, and that's a little bit concerning, that they don't have this depth group. But yeah, will Kamal Barnett, will he be a guy that can be in the rotation and make plays? You're looking at him. Cam Pruitt has been around now. Will he be more of a consistent guy? Be out there all the time? What will he kind of do? Those are a couple other guys to pay attention to. But I think Chase is ahead of him, and I think it'll be Chase and Mo for the linebacker spot, and we'll see if they can just be solid, kind of just being reliable guys out there all the time. I think there's a drop off though, especially if Torre's not out there.
Okay. I do have two. I'm not going to bother with the kickers and punters. I don't care about them. I thought our punting was terrible last year. Personally, I thought our special teams punt coverage wise, we already know how that we lost the national championship game, and largely, and that was a major component. The kicker situation, as our kicker, does it look decent at this point, at least? Just yes or no?
It looks like they're going to bout it out.
Okay.
Yeah, both of them got opportunities there in the spring game. Weinberg, made a field goal. They made their extra points. Roca's the other one. Dylan Joyce is back at punter. So, yeah, and we'll kind of see. We're not seeing it. We don't see kickers all spring, just where they warm up. So I can't give you anything. The only time we saw them kick was in the spring game, and they were fine that day. Both of them made their extra points, just the one field goal opportunity. And it was a short one.
Mario Cristobal. We've had our opinions about Mario Cristobal. I went from being very, very high to very, very low to calling him out. But realistically, I thought he did a much better job as the season went on. I think he's finally kind of fitting into the position. Or what are your thoughts of Mario Cristobal and his evolution as a head coach, and recognizing what he's good at, what he might not be good at? And maybe he seems like he's finally chilling out a little bit, like publicly, with these, like he's showing a little bit more personality in these interviews, even though I can't get one. He's showing more personality with these national guys that when you see him otherwise, he's like very, very rigid and very, very, like, bro, I remember when you were a GA, and you were here back in early 2000s and you were chill, now you're a politician. But what do you think of his evolution coaching this team?
Yeah, if we just touch on his evolution at Miami as the head coach, I think, he definitely he definitely deserves a lot of credit for the playoff run last year, to get that team to play at a really high level at some tough places, some tough venues against some really good teams. So deserves a lot of credit for that. And, for me, I think he deserved a lot of criticism for those 12 wins in the first 2 years, and how some of those went. And, sorry, it just didn't look good initially, right? There was some bad losses. It was like, is this thing going to get turned around? And I think one of the things that Mario, you touched on the interviews, look, his best attribute, everyone has known, has talked about, it's a little bit different now with NIL, but just is being a recruiter. He's going to do well in certain settings, delivering his message. I think that's the big thing that I've kind of noticed over the years of him being at Miami, is right or wrong, whether you believe in some of the things he says or not, he has been very consistent in his message and his belief in what he wants in this program. And I think that's important because, Rudy, you know this. When you look at sports, you look at head coaches, it doesn't matter the sport. There's all kinds of ways to win. You can have a tough coach, you could have an easier or a softer coach, or a player's coach. There's all different styles of ways to win games or to have winning programs. And it's not just one thing that you have to do this and you have to, and I think Coach Cristobal really understands what he wants. And I think he's doing a good job, or has done a good job, especially recently, these last couple of years, of instilling that and letting that kind of take over his program. There's messages that he has said recently, or when he says it, I really soak it in. And it's that, he's saying the things of, he really wants players, recruits, everybody to come out and watch this team practice. This isn't for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And I that's stuff that we heard a long time ago with this program, that Miami's not for everybody. For different reasons, it's tough, it's hard, it's difficult. You're going to get coached, yelled at, all these kinds of things that make it difficult. The pressures of the program playing in here, we're starting to see that come up again. That there's high expectations. It's not just whatever's happened in the past. But so I just think he's done a really good job of wanting, knowing his identity, what he wants his team to look like, and then going after that and continuing to stay consistent with it. I think that's been important, and I think, I think that's what he's done a really good job of. And they've been in the mix the last couple of years. That's what you want for every program across the country. You want to be in the mix for the top stuff. Now, you don't always win the national title. Obviously, for Miami, you don't always win your league championship, and things like that. And things, or even last year, it was disappointing that they don't win the national title. So there are disappointments along the way. That's sports, that's football, that's college football. That's how it goes sometimes. But they're in the mix. They're in the mix again this year. They'll be a highly rated preseason team. They'll be picked to win the ACC, I'm sure, but when that comes out this summer. So that's what you want. And then we'll see if this team can deliver. But I think Coach Cristobal's, again, done a good job of getting to what he wants it to look like. And you touched on maybe a little bit more relaxed. I think he knows he has a good team. He knows he has a good team. Now, will that translate all the way into winning all your games that everybody around the country hopes to do? We'll see. But he likes where they're at. And he always says it. And it's definitely true, because I touched on it, but he said there's more work to be done. And I agree with him when he says it, because you see things that are flashing. They got to tighten up a little bit, but that's what summer's for. And this will be a big summer for this team, I think.
And final one. I know you didn't touch on recruiting yet. Recruiting, that's the one area where I feel very comfortable with him on. I mean, I have heard this statement. I want you to watch us practice, because we practice differently. You've heard that from a lot of national people, like Josh Pate and the guys from On3 who come down, who do national. I mean, they've said that the practicing at Miami is just different. The physicality is different. And I think that's what creates the creatures that Josh Pate alluded to when you have that type of physicality, which to me, I love. It's old school football, or the closest thing to old school football, where people used to hit all the time in practice. But looking at the recruiting perspective, they pick up this kid out of Chicago, the QB, who I watched this film. The kid looks absolutely spectacular to me. And you look at these different guys he's bringing in. You got this kid out of East St. Louis, the running back, who looks to be a monster running back. What are your thoughts of the job he's doing recruiting? What players do you think will set this class apart? Because they're recruiting at a very, very high level, it seems like to me. Your thoughts?
Yeah, just in general with recruiting, I think what's fun, I touched on Miami, essentially their season, their team in the mix. With recruiting, they're in the mix with a lot of these top level guys. Now, they're not all going to come to Miami, but just the fact that they're in the discussion. And I think one of the things that I've kind of noticed too is Miami's just not in the discussion because just NIL or just because it's a name, or maybe people throw it in there just to throw in Miami. I think they're legitimately in the mix because of the success they've had, the style of play that's exciting and that's been winning. Now, they still have steps to go. When I say they've been winning, yeah, they've got to be better. They're obviously hoping to be better than the 10-2 regular season. There's more room to grow than what they've done the last couple of years. But I think that's what's good with recruiting. And again, they're going to stick to their identity of what they want. They're going to try to identify the guys that love football, that love competition. Those are the guys that they're going to try to go after. And, I think that's just like the general rule with where they're at. And yeah, you touched on Israel Abrams, the guy out of Chicago there, the quarterback. So that's interesting. That's exciting, to see him come into the program, a high level quarterback. We haven't seen that for a while. And it'll be interesting if Mensah, is Mensah coming back for year 2, or is he going to have another year, or is he going to leave early? So that'll be kind of just dependent. I think either way, you'd feel good about it, because if he leaves, typically you would think he'd have a good season and leave. And then if he comes back, you'd obviously feel good about that most likely. So I just think in recruiting, they're just doing their best to really identify the guys that would fit into their program. That's something that's popped up a little bit with Coach Cristobal. I've heard him say that recently. That's something that was so important years ago. But now they're starting to have to be a little bit more picky about who they get into the program, which is a good thing. But you have to make the correct decisions on some guys as best as possible, doing all their homework. It's still really important. You still got to recruit high school guys at the same level. I know you asked about Hawks earlier. I didn't touch on him, but yeah, we'll see if he can be a contributor. I think that second, even at the least, if he could kind of be in that second group as offensive line, that'd be important. But yeah, if he can play, they'll get him in. They've showed that they'll get a guy in there to, even if it's 6-man rotation like we've seen in the last couple of years. But recruiting's been fun. It's fun that they've got some top guys in the mix, and they're trying to get them all on campus. That's a big thing for them. Yeah. Get them down here, let them see what this is all about.
You know, when I heard Israel Abrams say, I've had a dream of going to Miami since I was a kid, I'm sitting here like, you were a kid when we stunk. Like, what? Maybe you were watching 90s film or 80s film because you wanted to come here, and after watching us in the 210s, around there, that was wild to me. But it was fun to hear what he was saying and all that stuff. Final one, and I'm going to put you on the spot right here. I know we got to go. What is Miami?
I'm probably not going to answer it, Rudy.
You're probably not going to answer it. Final record. What does Miami do next year? Way early.
Yeah, I was right. I'm probably not going to answer it. No, I think this team. I think one of the things. So win total, right, is set 10.5 right now. I think that's where we're at.
Do you think this team goes undefeated regular season?
No.
Really? Okay.
I mean, yeah.
We're so jaded. We're so scarred.
Yeah, I think there's some. I think the benefits is they do have a lot of pieces on this team. You have a quarterback you feel comfortable in. You have a winning program. You have a guy like Malachi Toney who's, he's going to put up a big season, a huge season. It's going to be a difficult matchup for everybody he goes up against. Mark Fletcher. I think these guys returning is that's huge for this team. So yeah, I think they're going to be good. I think there's no question about it. How good, we'll see. I think the big thing is just pay attention to the regular season, concentrate on that. Can they get the 11 wins? I think that'll be good. Can you get to can you get to the ACC title game? And we haven't seen that. I think I hope that this program understands it's two things. I think that it's really important for this team to understand it's not just going to be given that you're going to be good again. I think that's something they're going to have to fight with this team in general. That's just the way it is. It's not these guys in particular. Just think the nature of success, making sure that it's not the complacency. The coaches are doing their best to try to get that instilled. And the other thing is they can't just assume if they go 10-2, they're going back to the playoffs. I don't think you're going to see that from the ACC. I don't think that's going to be the recipe of getting in. I think they should, obviously they took advantage of what they did, but yeah, the goal has to be better. The goal has to be get to Charlotte, win the ACC, those kinds of things. And I think, yeah, they definitely have a chance. And I think when you look at the rest of the ACC, we do this every year, Rudy. A lot of people, almost every year, we do this. What's the ACC have? What are these teams? How good are they really? But we see teams emerge. You see a team like last year, like Virginia, kind of emerge, touch on Duke. Teams will kind of rise to it. Clemson, it's not the Clemson that we've seen in the past, but with their quarterback situation, will they kind of get on a roll and whatnot? Yeah, that game at Notre Dame looks like it's going to be a difficult one. So we'll see how Miami does in that one. But yeah, I think I wouldn't predict an undefeated season. I don't know if I ever would, though, Rudy. Like, I don't know. Other than those early teams, kind of those early 2000s, I don't know since then when I would have predicted that necessarily. But yeah, certainly a lot of reasons to be excited about this team. There's no doubt about it.
And that's the final one then. Is this the most excited or the most talented team that you've seen since you've covered Miami?
No, probably not. And even if I just look at last year's team, I think this team has a chance to be better offensively, but the offensive team that we saw 2 years ago with Cam Ward was really impressive. Defensively last year was really good. I think the key for this team is to maybe be a little bit more balanced.
I mean, all together, like putting it all together. Is this the most talented team that you've seen since?
It's hard to say that. I think this team, this last year's team, is going to have a bunch of draft picks. So I wouldn't go that far back to say a more talented team. No, I wouldn't say that. And
were you as excited for last year's team as you are for this year's team? I guess the question I'm asking is because like we watched the offense scuffle a lot last year. Like they looked like at times it was okay. It's 3 yards in a cloud of dust, but they looked like it was a struggle to score. Whereas Cam Ward's team was easy to score. We couldn't stop a nosebleed. Last year we stopped everything and then we couldn't score. I
Yeah,
mean,
so so last year I thought last year's team was going to take a step back offensively, and they did, right? They just did. Numbers, all those things, from where they ranked in the ACC, all these things. Defensively, they got a lot better. I didn't expect that. I thought they'd be better. That surprised me that they got that they were as good. I thought there were questions. I mean, we can just keep going, but Ruben Bain coming off the injury, Akeem Mesidor, his injury stuff, Motore dealing with injuries. We didn't know exactly what Keontae Scott and Jacoby Thomas were going to be going into last year. All four of those guys, Torrey was solid, but the other four were just great. Didn't deal with any of that stuff. Keontae dealt with his injury, but came back and was outstanding. So I think this year, again, you kind of want to, if you just want to look at it, you kind of want to be top three, closer to top three in offense, top three in defense in the ACC to really, that's where you want to kind of sit. You kind of want to stay out of this 6, 7, 8 range like they were in offensive statistics. Defensively, they're essentially number one on most everything. You obviously want that. So, yeah, I think that's the thing. I didn't have and Malachi Tony was a question mark coming into last year. Positive signs, positive things you heard, but even the team, what they thought internally, he surprised them. And you saw, and that's a good example of someone that was like, he was good, showed some good signs early in the season, and then just kind of kept it going, like really kind of built on it. And then they start feeding him different ways, the passes, those kinds of things. So I think that's what's fun. You kind of go into a season and then with one thing and one hope or one thought, and especially college football, things can kind of change as it goes along and how teams are kind of going. I like that they have a chance to have some momentum early on in the season. I think that'll be big for this team. They've got to create their own identity. Last year's team did have their own identity. They were able to do that. You touched on some of the things offensively they struggled with, but during that playoff run, they knew who they wanted to be and was able to kind of mold it. I thought they played really good complementary football, and that'll be big for this team as well. So I just think, I think that they can be good. I understand why everybody's excited. Absolutely. People should be.
Folks, this is why I have Chris Stock on here, man. He keeps it real. He doesn't glaze. He doesn't kiss ass. He's very much my style. We've experienced this together for so many years. We went way over time. We tried to have this as a cut at 30 minutes. It's gone almost an hour, so I apologize to Chris. But, this is why Chris Stock is who he is, because he doesn't sit here and pussyfoot around and sit here and tell you, it's all, roses and daisies. Look, we got work to do. The team looks good, but we got a lot of work to do. So they better be ready to ball, man. Chris, I appreciate you as always. Folks, if you haven't subscribed to 24/7 Sports Inside the U.com, 247 Sports Miami, go do it right now. They provide the greatest recruiting coverage, Miami Hurricanes coverage in the world. Man, Chris, I appreciate it, man. Thank you, bro.
All right, Rudy, appreciate it, man. Take care.
All right, have a good one. That'll do it for this edition of Hurricanes Unfiltered. Be sure to like, subscribe, and follow. Hype the video. Greatly appreciate y'all. It's Hurricanes Unfiltered, baby. Come on now.